he really inspires me because he's just constantly thinking of how to take care of like each and every individual that comes to Mantra House. And so without further ado, let's give a big round of applause for our honey Bhakta.
Thank you, Allison. And you guys can call me Father HB. First of all, I just want to thank everyone for coming to Mantra House. We've been doing Mantra House for about 2 years now, and slowly but surely we've been seeing a lot of you guys keep coming back and supporting us in every way possible. And so more than a mantra and just a house, it's like a house where we're actually becoming like a family. So this is like the Mantra House family. So thank you guys for being here. And originally, what was actually going to happen is that I was going to do a PowerPoint presentation, and I was going to talk about understanding third eye meditation, which was a bit of an esoteric subject. I was going to speak about the realization behind it, its limitations, and how to go beyond third eye meditation. But somehow or other we lost a cable at our other club at UCLA, and so we can't have the projector tonight. So I thought I'll just speak about, in practical sense, how I came into Krishna consciousness, or how I came into spiritual consciousness. Which also connects to third eye meditation, because I was like a fanatic at that. So I can also talk about that as well. So pretty much my spiritual path began for me, especially at the age of 19. Originally I was going to a university. The university was called Cal State Northridge. Nice. And at the time I thought coming straight out of high school, going to university was like a great thing. People in my high school would always glorify the fact that if you go from high school directly to a university, that's something that should be looked up to, something that everybody should do. And so I got struck with like really bad news when I was at the university. I was told that I could no longer attend Cal State University because I didn't have the proper funds to continue paying for my classes. So the hard news was that I was going to go from Cal State Northridge all the way to a community college. And I was thinking, man, that sucks. Like, I'm over here about to not graduate, but I could have access to a 4-year degree, and I have to go to a community college. But little did I know that that switch was actually going to transform my life into something very positive. At the regular university, I was sort of absorbed in that mentality. Alright dude, let's party. We're going to try to hit like all the frat parties, and I'm never going to join a frat, but I'm just going to have fun. And slowly but surely, now that I'm some years older, I see that that path is a bit destructive. I saw how it took my friends on a completely different course that wasn't really beneficial for them. So I'm actually very thankful that I had to go to a 2-year college, which was SMC. It's only like 15 minutes away from here, because that's how I actually began my spiritual quest. And so when I was 19 years old, I was just your regular, I was into skateboarding, I was into streetwear clothing, fashion and things of that sort. And I was also into smoking heavy weed. And so I would smoke weed, and my friends would just, at the time, when we would all hang out in a circle, they would sort of talk about partying and drinking and fast food or whatever. But somehow or other within my own nature, every time that I would partake in that, my whole mind would take me on a whole different direction. I would begin to look around the room, or especially if I was out in the outdoors, I would look around nature and I would just like trip out on life. I would think about nature and the earth and the universe and stars and the possibility of life on other planets. Also, I would look within myself. I would do like an introspective reading, and I would begin to ask myself, damn, like what am I doing? Like my mom, she thinks that I'm at my friend's house just watching TV or something. I'm over here smoking. So I was just like that. And throughout that whole process, sometimes my friend would just look at me and they'll be talking to me at the same time, but I'll just be in a whole other world. And they would begin asking me questions and I'll just be like, yeah, dude. Like I couldn't stop. I was just stuck. And so throughout that process, I sort of began to grow within myself. I was like, I'm doing this wrong. Like I'm not really communicating with my brother or something like that. I was beginning to look within. And at the same time, I became very inquisitive in the universe and things of that sort. So just one random day at my school, I'm sitting down with my friends and we're probably plotting that we were going to go play basketball or something. And I look towards my left and I see this older lady, and she has a poster with this picture of an infinity sign with different forms of life like animals, horses, gorillas. And then I see that these animals are slowly transforming into a human being, and there was an infinity sign. And as soon as I looked at that poster, I was like, damn, like what is this? This looks trippy. And so I went over to her table and I saw that there was various books. I saw Science of Self-Realization, Bhagavad Gita, different books of Eastern spirituality. And so I started asking her questions and she began to answer them. The answers were a bit too advanced that I couldn't remember really what she was saying. But I became absorbed in the essence of the environment, like the energy that she was giving off, which was like if I was in a forest or something, I just felt super at peace. So after that day, she handed me this book, the Bhagavad Gita, and I remember taking it home and realizing, dude, I'm definitely going to read this book. There's something about this book that I have to read. But it took me some time to actually open the book to read it. I was a philosophy major, so in our courses I had to read several other books that were a bit difficult to understand. But one thing was for sure, that every time that I would hear the stories of different philosophers and their solutions to the problems of life, I knew that this Bhagavad Gita seems like a bit old and the cover is a bit unattractive, but let me give it a try. So I began to open the book, and it was a bit difficult to understand at first, but I kept pushing through, and I started noticing that there was some philosophical solutions there that were really very relevant to the modern world, such as choosing a vegetarian diet. And by choosing a vegetarian diet, not only do you help the animal survive and be like an animal, living out in nature and being cohesive with its whole environment, but also you get rid of that karmic aspect of killing another animal. So I was like, okay, that makes sense. And then slowly but surely I stopped reading the Bhagavad Gita and I didn't pay much attention to it. But they had started a musical meditation club at my school. And so one of my friends, she was from Kazakhstan. She invited me to go. She's like, dude, you should come try this out. We're gonna do yoga. It's gonna be cool. We're gonna have musical meditation and things of that sort. So I thought, all right, I've never done yoga. I'm super nervous, and let me just give it a try. Little did I know that this yoga wasn't really the yoga of asana, which was more of like a musical yoga practice, just as Allison was doing before. And so I tried it out. I sat in the grass area, and they started chanting the mantra. They gave me a piece of paper to begin reciting the mantra. And I was like, whoa, this is peaceful. Like I naturally feel high right now. And then they told me, hey, if you want to come learn more about this, just come to this place called the Bhakti House. And the Bhakti House was this exact center before. And so the first time I came, I heard a monk speak. And he was talking about how he had came to spirituality. And I find it fascinating now that I'm over here sitting in that same position talking about how I came. So I just had that realization in my mind right now. But I was I was still stuck in my ways. I was still gonna go home and I was still gonna spark that joint. And I was still gonna just trip out on life. But as I kept coming to this place and I kept hearing philosophy after philosophy and practicality as to how this can actually benefit us and how we can apply it in our day-to-day life, whatever it is that you do, whether you're a business person or you're into yoga or you're a teacher, you're a police officer, you could apply this philosophy in your life. So I became assured that, okay, if they keep saying this, and I'm not going to become a monk, I'm not going to renounce anything, but I'm still going to continue with my studies, and I'm going to continue doing what I love, and I'm going to try to connect this to the spiritual aspect of life. And so I continued smoking the weed, and I began to think, like, man, this philosophy makes more and more sense. Like, it kept motivating me to come back. And so I decided, okay, I'm gonna stick through this. And then this is when the third eye meditation started to sort of take its place. So I'm sitting in my computer. Usually I was either studying how to design clothing or how to design like different concepts in terms of visual videos for clothing, like such as streetwear. I was into clothing like Supreme and things of that sort, always skating. Or I was completely fascinated with studying extraterrestrials. I was like a UFO fanatic. I would spend like hours just watching videos and just being fascinated and thinking like, man, that's crazy. So one day I came across like a UFO discussion on a podcast, and I heard about this guy. His name is Joe Rogan. You guys know Joe Rogan?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's the homie. And so he began to talk about his experience with the sensory deprivation tank. And so I was thinking, dude, that sounds amazing. He started talking about how he entered this tank and everything was completely dark, and he would just lay down in this water filled with salt. So he would just float in this tank and just, he started explaining how he started seeing like different beings and like ultra-dimensional experiences. And I was like, whoa, immediately I Googled Los Angeles float tank. And I came across a float tank that was really close. It was in Venice. And so I set up a meeting. It was $40 for 2 hours. And yeah, it's cheap. Yeah, so I decided to go. And it was a trippy experience. It was like a weird setting pretty much. They have like this tank that it looks similar to a refrigerator. And so once you open it, it's maybe like 10 feet long. And it's pitch dark in there, you can't see a thing. But as soon as you step in, you feel the water. And you feel that this water is a bit slippery. And so as soon as you lay down, your body just begins to float. It's like you're in a cork in water. And what's fascinating about this tank, it's that the air temperature is the same as the water temperature. So it literally feels like you're just floating in nothing, where you can just completely deprive yourself of your sense perception and you could just focus on the mind. You could either go to sleep or you could, I don't know, like trip out on something. But the experience that I had was that as soon as I began to lay down, I began to focus in this part of my head naturally without even thinking. And I began to see like a violet mist amidst my essence of being when I began to meditate on this part of my head. And little by little I began to see different formations, different animals. I would see a scorpion, I would see shapes. And next thing you know, as I dove deeper in my whole essence of being was completely focused into that meditation, I began to see like weird humanoid faces. Like weird faces would just appear. And I was just like, whoa. Next thing you know, I hear a knock in the chamber, and it was time for me to go. My body felt relaxed. I skated back to my car. And I thought, man, that was a trippy experience. So naturally, as I came home, I wanted to practice this on my own. So I remember just laying down in my bed before going to sleep, and I started envisioning certain things. and I began to see certain formations again. I would play around with that violet mist that was in the middle of my forehead, and I would try to switch it colors from violet to green to pink. And so I saw it as a training exercise. And then one day, just randomly, something that's pretty much esoteric happened to me, something out of the world, something out of the normal. One day I was focusing on this part of my head when naturally I just fell asleep. And then next thing you know, it was around 3 in the morning and my eyes open up and I feel as if there's some presence right above me. My whole body became paralyzed. I just couldn't move anymore. And I felt that there was something there. When immediately this entity sort of begins to pull my astral body. You guys have heard of astral projection? It began to pull away on my astral body because it wasn't this hand. It was some sort of hand that was within me. And it began to sort of tug at it. And I just became hesitant. Literally, to be honest with you guys, it felt like a real hand. And I wouldn't let go. And then as the hand let go of my hand, eventually that hand just touched my chest and it disappeared and I came back to consciousness. And I was like, man, that was a crazy experience. And a few days later, my friend, he was a monk, his name was Yashudev. He was the one that was organizing the musical meditation club. He began to tell me, hey man, there's this, he's like a spiritual teacher. He's going to come to Bhakti house and he's going to give a nice talk for college students. Why don't you come by? And I thought, alright, sounds pretty fascinating. Prior to those 2 days, I began to practice third eye meditation to an even deeper extent, to the point where not only was I seeing a violet mist at this point, but I began to form an eye. There was an eye just directly staring back at me. And it just seemed natural for me to meditate like this. I didn't do any research about it. I was feeling like, damn, I'm a powerful being. I got this third eye, and let me see what I could do with it. So I'm coming to this place, the Bhakti house. He's a Swami, his name was Devamrita Swami. And so there was about 30 students, similar to this, maybe a little bit more. And he walks in the room, and he sits down. And so naturally, I'm listening to his talk, and at the same time, I'm thinking, all right, let me test to see how big of a spiritual teacher he is. So I began to meditate on my third eye right in the middle of the lecture. Like as he was talking, I just began to focus on my eye, and it got to the point that I was trying to exert my whole energy in third eye meditation, and I started focusing on the spiritual teacher that was sitting here. And keep in mind that there's like 30 people surrounding me. And so it was getting to the point that nothing was happening. He kept talking and talking, and my head began to throb almost. I was thinking like, man, what's happening? When all of a sudden in the middle of his talk, he sort of closes his eyes and he just snaps his hand and he's like, stop playing these games. And then he continues on with his talk. Immediately I thought like, man, that was for me. Like, and so at this point I was listening attentively because I was like, man, this is no joke here. This is like something serious. And so talk was over, and one of my friends told me, hey, do you want to come speak to him? And I thought, okay, yeah, I'll ask him a few questions. And so when I came and started speaking to him, I was sort of feeling like I was spiritually elevated. I was telling him, yeah, I've been chanting the mantra, and at the same time I've been meditating on my third eye. And every time that I chant the mantra and meditate on my third eye, it just feels like clarity, a sense of clarity. And his face was just like, And then after that, I began to explain to him that whole astral projection experience. I was telling him, I did have this weird experience. So I had like some form of sleep paralysis, and this entity came and tried to pull me away from my body. And it was a bit scary actually. And then he's like, it seems to me that this type of meditation that you're doing is sort of diving you deep into some sort of subtle realm when there's certain entities that might disturb you in your sleep. So you have to be careful with these things, because you always need some sort of teacher to guide you through these things. And at the time I was a new practitioner, and most of you guys might know this, some of you guys might not know this, but our type of meditation is mantra meditation, where we meditate on beads. And so at the time I had the beads around my neck, and so he looked at me and he looked at my beads and he grabbed them and he told me, simply just practice musical mantra meditation, because that's considered to be like a very powerful type of meditation that will transcend even third eye meditation. So then I was like, oh, whoa, it's pretty fascinating. And so then I began to actually do my research on what third eye meditation was. Third eye meditation is considered to be a meditation that's still within matter. We have two different things in spiritual life. We have spirit, which is considered to be primary, and we have matter, which is secondary. So within matter, as a spiritual being from the spiritual dimension enters into the world of matter, naturally he'll take up a body that's composed of both matter and spirit. And so within that, it's like once you take a mixture, you always get a sort of like a mix of both combined together. So in the material world, we have a body that's composed of both subtle energies. Subtle means that we cannot perceive it with our eyes. And we have a mixture of gross. Gross means that it's actually perceivable, that we feel it, just like my body's like really gross. I can feel it right now. And so I began to, that actually makes sense. And as I dove deeper into the ancient teachings of India, it began to explain that the human body is similar to like a battery. It needs to run somehow. So the chakras are considered to be different energy levels that do certain things in order to connect the being to a higher sense of reality. And not only that, but it began to explain, as I began to read these books, that the human form of life is considered to be very special across the whole of the universe. Because you have the ability to inquire, like, why am I here? Like, where am I going? And so this type of experience that we have, the human form, is very valuable. Not only because you have the ability to come in contact with higher realms of life, but also because we can come in touch with something sublime, something spiritual that makes sense. And so when I read this, I was like, whoa, this makes perfect sense. I drove the next morning to the temple, which is right over here, and I decided that I'm just going to go over there. I'm going to go at 5:30 a.m., waking up earlier than usual, and I'm going to chant on my meditation beats. Little did I know that that decision was going to completely transform my life. Because I walk into the room, and next thing you know, I see a dozen monks just chanting this mantra in union. And they were all like, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And I was just like, whoa, this is crazy. Like the whole temple began to echo in this like vibration. And nobody bothers you. You just walk in and everybody's like practicing their meditation. And so I decided, okay, I'm just going to sit here. And the lights are a bit dim, so it's like a perfect setting for meditation. And I'm just going to practice this mantra. So I began to chant like, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. And an hour went by, and pretty much like 2 hours went by, and I was just like, oh man, this is something amazing. Not only was I feeling great that day, I was feeling like I was doing something productive. Although it seemed like I was just in some room chanting some words, I felt like I was doing something beneficial. And so I began to do a little bit more research on the mantra. I began to understand that this mantra is coming from the ancient tradition of India. And so this particular mantra is meant to awaken the self. It's meant for us to connect to something divine, something beyond the normal, something that we generally don't see in the television, we don't see in the internet. It allows us to begin to not only question who we are, but actually where we're coming from. And so literally, what this mantra translates to is that Hare is the female energy of the divine, and Krishna is the male energy of the divine. And so once you begin to chant this mantra, it's like you're automatically connecting to the source of all existence. And so immediately, as soon as I read this, I was like, this makes perfect sense. This whole time I'm trying to meditate on the third eye and trying to gain some sort of psychic ability, when in actuality, immediately I could connect to the highest principle of spiritual consciousness. It's actually explained in the Bhagavad Gita that the name Krishna also means Yogeshwara. And Yogeshwara means that he is the source of all mystic powers. And so logically and philosophically, this actually made sense to me. And so I continued on being a college student. I started utilizing this philosophy, not only to better myself, but creatively speaking, I started designing clothes. I made a clothing brand by the name of Celestial, which means like divine. And I started incorporating those designs with aspects of the philosophy that I would read about here. So I would get creative with it. I would utilize what I was reading in the books, but immediately I was connecting it to the modern day. And after a while, it just became my hobby. Just coming here, feeling the energies, actually very positive energies, because when I would go back to my parents' house, I would come here and I would naturally feel high. I would be in such a good mood. I wanted to help my mom out. I wanted to talk to my friends about their problems. There was something about this place that really sparked something in me to do good for the world. And so that was a bit of the beginning of my spiritual practice. And it was only a basic description, but it seems like we're out of time. And maybe if you guys have any questions, maybe we can see if anybody has any questions.
I guess I do kind of. You say you like to smoke the weed, or you did at one point.
Did.
How is that? I mean, is that something you still incorporate today, or do you lose that? It's funny, but I mean, like, I smoke weed every day, right? And I came here today, was like, okay, this is gonna be the first day where I don't smoke, I don't get up and I don't smoke, so I can come here with like a clear head. So, like, how does smoking weed and meditating,
So
is it a bad thing, a good thing?
So with meditation, it naturally awakens a high in you. And so what I started seeing is that when I would smoke weed, yes, I would get high, and I would have certain thoughts that I normally wouldn't have with a sober state of mind. But as I began to come here more and more and practice this mantra meditation, I started realizing that when I would smoke, it sort of like constrained my high. I wasn't really feeling as open as I usually were here. I wasn't having as deeper thoughts, and I wasn't feeling as good. So slowly but surely, I felt like I was getting a higher taste coming here and practicing mantra meditation, reading these books. And eventually I got to the point that I was like, you know what, I don't need this anymore. It's becoming an impediment to my meditation. And it was a bit healthier for me, because within my own body I was able to be more active in life. And so naturally I just let go of the old and just brought the new, which was meditation, mantra meditation. Yeah.
To add to his thing, I would say intuitively you already knew that to connect, that you didn't want to have that smoke in your system.
Right. Yeah.
You already knew intuitively, you know? So
Yeah.
the science was already working in your brain. And I'm someone who smoked for many, many years. Whenever I take anything serious, you put that aside, you know, even if you're traveling in another country, you know, I wouldn't smoke for months and months, and you didn't need it because you were taking it all in. It's the same with spirituality.
Yeah.
Hey, I heard that when people go on ayahuasca trips in, I think it's in Peru or somewhere, they have similar experiences to what you have described. And then you had the gentleman that they basically got, I guess, quasi-similar experience through other medical uses or medical. In your research, have you?
It seems like we're out of time. and we're very thankful for everybody here. We're about to dive into mantra meditation. We're about to vibrate to a higher frequency, and give a round of applause for Chandrasekhar.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna,